Hello everyone, and welcome to my BNB CBS Gossip 24 channel. Deke, you have a child? The words hang in the air like a crack of thunder that splits the sky without warning, and in that suspended moment Hope feels as though the world has tilted off its axis, because nothing in her life, not the carefully constructed trust between them, not the shared glances and half-spoken promises, not even the silences they've learned to live inside together, ever hinted at something so enormous, so quietly devastating, and she stares at him as if he's suddenly a stranger wearing Deke's face. Her mind racing backward through every memory, every conversation, every time he deflected a question about his past with a joke or a shrug, every moment she assumed she understood the man standing in front of her, and now all of it feels like a carefully staged illusion collapsing in real time. Deke doesn't answer immediately, and that pause, that infinitesimal delay, tells her everything before he even speaks, because the truth is already written in his eyes, heavy with fear and regret and a strange, aching protectiveness that Hope has never seen there before, and when he finally exhales and nods, just once, as if bracing for impact, the confirmation lands with a force that steals her breath, because this isn't just a secret, it's a life, a child, a whole universe he kept hidden from her, and the questions come rushing in faster than she can contain them. How old? Where? With whom? Why didn't you tell me? But tangled beneath the shock is something deeper and more painful, the realization that Deke chose silence every single day they were together, chose not to trust her with the most defining truth of his life, and that choice slices through her with a sharpness that makes her chest ache. Deke tries to explain, his words tumbling over each other as he talks about fear and mistakes and the need to protect someone who never asked to be part of his chaos, and Hope listens. Or tries to, because the sound of his voice is familiar and yet suddenly foreign, like a song she thought she knew by heart but now realizes she's been singing the wrong lyrics all along, and as he speaks of the child, his voice softens in a way that makes something twist painfully inside her, because she hears love there, fierce and undeniable, and that love both reassures and terrifies her, reassuring because it proves Deke is capable of deep devotion, terrifying because it means this secret was never about her at all, it was about someone else who mattered more, someone he would always choose first. Hope feels anger rise, hot and insistent, anger at the lies, at the omissions, at the way her own life has been unknowingly shaped around a truth she was denied, and she wants to scream, to demand how he could look at her every day and not say anything, how he could let her imagine a future without telling her that his past had already written a chapter that would forever change what that future could look like. But alongside the anger is grief, quiet and heavy, mourning the version of Deke she thought she knew, mourning the simplicity she believed their relationship had, and perhaps mourning the life she unconsciously envisioned with him, one that now feels uncertain and fragile. As Deke talks about the child's laugh, about small hands gripping his finger, about bedtime stories told over the phone or in stolen moments, Hope feels the ground shift again, because she can't deny the humanity of it, the tenderness. And that makes everything more complicated, because how do you stay furious at someone who loves their child so completely, and yet how do you forgive someone who excluded you from such a monumental truth? The room feels too small for all these emotions, and Hope paces, needing movement to keep from shattering, her thoughts colliding in a relentless storm. Does this mean there's someone else permanently tied to him? What happens when the child needs more? Where do I fit in a life that already has a center I didn't know existed? And she realizes with a sharp pang that the betrayal isn't just about the secret itself, but about the loss of choice, because Deke made decisions for her by withholding the truth, deciding what she could handle, deciding that she didn't deserve to know, and that realization hurts more than she expected. Deke insists he never wanted to hurt her, that he was waiting for the right time, that he was afraid she would leave. And Hope almost laughs at the irony, because the very thing he feared has now been made infinitely more likely by his silence, and she wonders if love built on omissions can survive when exposed to the full light of truth. As the conversation stretches on, time seems to blur, minutes folding into each other as they circle the same points, Deke apologizing, Hope questioning, both of them trying to grasp a reality that has irrevocably changed, and she becomes acutely aware that this revelation is not a single moment but a fracture that will echo forward, touching every interaction, every plan, every expectation they have of each other, and she knows, with a clarity that both steadies and frightens her, that nothing will ever be simple again, the idea of Deke as a father reshapes her perception of him in ways she didn't anticipate, adding layers of responsibility and vulnerability that both deepen and complicate her feelings, because she sees now that loving him would mean loving a life. That includes a child, a commitment that doesn't come with easy compromises or half measures, and she isn't sure if she's ready for that, or if she ever would be, and the uncertainty gnaws at her. Yet even as she contemplates walking away, a part of her aches at the thought of losing him, of severing the connection that has brought her comfort and joy, and that internal conflict feels almost unbearable, like being pulled in opposite directions by equally powerful forces. When the conversation finally quiets, when words are exhausted and only the weight of what's been said remains, Hope realizes that this secret has not only exposed a hidden child but has stripped their relationship down to its most vulnerable core, forcing them to confront truths about trust, fear, and the limits of love, and she understands that whatever happens next, whether they try to rebuild with honesty or choose to part ways, will be shaped forever by this moment, this revelation that shattered her assumptions, and demanded that she see Deke not as the man she imagined, but as the complicated, flawed, deeply human person he truly is, a father with a past that cannot be undone and a present that now stands at a crossroads. And as Hope takes a deep breath, feeling the ache of possibility and loss intertwine, she knows with absolute certainty that nothing is the same, that the story she thought she was living has been rewritten, and that the next chapter, whatever it holds, will require courage she isn't yet sure she possesses, but will have to find all the same. Hope's world fractures in a single, breath-stealing instant when the question slips from her lips, half disbelief, half denial, "Deke, you have a child?" And the silence that follows roars louder than any confession, because in that suspended moment everything she believed about love, truth, and the man standing in front of her begins to unravel into jagged, irreparable pieces, and the shock that seizes her is not just about the existence of a child but about the realization that Deke, the man whose eyes once promised refuge and whose arms once felt like home, has been living a double life so intricately concealed that even Hope, who prides herself on seeing the good and sensing the truth in people, never suspected the depth of his deception, and as the revelation sinks in her thoughts spiral backward through every whispered vow, every late-night phone call, every unexplained absence, now all reinterpreted through the devastating lens of betrayal, because this is not merely a secret child but the exposure of a hidden identity, a life built on omissions and half-truths, and as Deke finally speaks, admitting that yes, he is a father, the words land like blows, each syllable stripping away another layer of illusion, and Hope's heart splinters under the weight of it, not only because she feels lied to but because she feels foolish for loving someone so completely while never truly knowing him, and yet the pain deepens when the next truth emerges, the mystery wife, the woman whose existence was never even hinted at, the marriage that rewrites everything Hope thought she understood, transforming moments of intimacy into stolen fragments of a reality that was never fully hers. And as the picture sharpens it becomes horrifyingly clear that Deke has been walking two parallel paths, one as a husband and a father bound by responsibility and secrecy, and another as a man professing love to Hope with a sincerity that now feels both genuine and unforgivable, because the cruelest part of this double life is not that he loved Hope while married, but that he truly did love her, and that love, real and aching, only complicates the wreckage it leaves behind, making Hope's devastation all the more profound as she grapples with the impossible contradiction of a man who can cradle a child, vow loyalty to a wife, and still look at her with longing that feels heartbreakingly authentic, and as her emotions ricochet between rage, sorrow, and an unbearable sense of loss, she realizes that the future she imagined, built on trust, redemption, and the belief that love could conquer the past, has collapsed in on itself, leaving behind only questions that have no comforting answers, while across the room Deacon watches his daughter crumble and something primal ignites within him, a fierce protective instinct fueled by his own history of mistakes and hard-earned lessons, because Deacon knows all too well the cost of secrets and the scars they leave, and as he steps forward, his presence becomes both shield and sword, his voice steady but laced with a warning edge as he recognizes that this revelation is not just about Deke's failures but about the toxic gravity of a place and a family dynamic that seems to thrive on manipulation and hidden truths, and when Steffy enters the equation, the tension ignites instantly, because Steffy represents everything that has ever stood in the way of Hope's happiness, every judgment, every power play, every unspoken accusation that Hope's love is naive or misguided, and now, standing amid the fallout of Deke's exposed double life, Steffy's reaction, whether smug, defensive, or genuinely stunned, becomes the final catalyst, the spark that pushes Hope and Deacon to the brink, because in that charged moment Hope realizes that staying means continuing to bleed in a place where her pain is just another storyline, another whispered scandal to be dissected and used as leverage, and as the weight of it all crashes down she straightens, her voice trembling but resolute, and together with Deacon she delivers the words that reverberate like a slammed door echoing through every corridor of memory and regret. "We're done with this place," 5 simple words that carry the force of 1,000 unspoken grievances, signaling not just a physical departure but an emotional severing from the cycles of betrayal and control that have defined too much of their lives. And as those words hang in the air, Steffy is left staring at the consequences of secrets finally dragged into the light, while Deke stands frozen between the life he hid and the woman he loved. Realizing too late that truth delayed can be more destructive than truth denied, and Hope, though shattered, takes her first step away from the wreckage with a clarity born of heartbreak, understanding that while love may forgive many things, it cannot survive without honesty, and that sometimes the bravest act is not fighting for what you love but walking away from what has already broken you, even if the echoes of what might have been will linger like ghosts long after the door closes. The silence after those 5 words stretches unbearably long, thick with consequences that no one present is ready to face, and as Hope turns away, the strength in her posture is almost cruel in its contrast to the storm tearing through her chest, because leaving does not mean the pain disappears, it only means she refuses to let it define her any longer, and with each step toward the door memories surge forward uninvited, flashes of laughter, stolen kisses, whispered promises that now feel like artifacts from another life, and behind her Deke finally moves, calling her name with a desperation that cracks his voice, a sound so raw it nearly stops her in her tracks. Because despite everything, despite the lies and the betrayal and the unbearable shock of learning he is not only a father but a husband bound to a woman who lived in the shadows of his confessions, she still recognizes the man she loved in that voice, and that recognition is its own kind of torture, forcing her to confront the most painful truth of all, that love does not simply vanish when trust is destroyed, it lingers, aching and unresolved, demanding to be acknowledged even as it must be abandoned. And Deacon senses this hesitation instantly, placing a steady hand on Hope's arm, grounding her before doubt can creep back in, because he knows how easy it is to confuse familiarity with safety, how tempting it is to believe that love alone can redeem a man who has not yet learned how to be honest, and as he guides her forward his gaze flicks briefly to Deke, filled not with triumph or cruelty but with a weary understanding, the look of someone who has stood on the wrong side of truth before and paid dearly for it, silently communicating that this moment is not about punishment but about accountability, and as the door closes behind Hope and Deacon the sound reverberates like a final verdict, leaving the room stripped bare of illusions. And Deke sinks into the weight of what he has lost, realizing that in trying to hold on to everything, a wife, a child, a lover, he has fractured the very foundation of his life, and now must face the wreckage alone, while elsewhere Hope exhales for the first time since the revelation, the breath shuddering as if her body is only now catching up to what her heart has endured, and she leans into Deacon's presence, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability because even strength needs refuge, and Deacon, ever the flawed but fiercely loyal father, does not rush her, does not offer hollow reassurances, only the quiet promise that she will not face the aftermath alone, because he understands that this is not just heartbreak but a reckoning, a moment that will force Hope to redefine who she is and what she will no longer accept, and as they leave the building behind the air outside feels sharper, cleaner, almost shocking in its normalcy, as if the world has not noticed that her life has just been cleaved in two, and that realization stings, reminding her that healing will not be immediate or simple, that there will be nights when the truth replays itself in cruel detail, when she imagines the child whose existence rewrote her reality, wonders about the mystery wife whose face she cannot picture but whose presence loomed over every moment she shared with Deke, and questions whether there were signs she ignored, instincts she silenced because she wanted so badly to believe in the man he presented himself to be, and yet amid the grief a fragile clarity begins to take root, the understanding that deception, no matter how wrapped in affection or remorse, is not love's companion but its enemy, and that by walking away she has chosen herself in a way she never fully has before, while back inside the walls they left behind Steffi stands frozen. The echo of "we're done with this place" looping relentlessly in her mind, because those words are not just a rejection of a location but a condemnation of a culture that thrives on secrets and power, and for perhaps the first time she is forced to confront her own role in the endless cycles of conflict, the way she has justified control as protection and dominance as necessity, and though she would never admit it aloud, the sight of hope choosing departure over destruction unsettles her deeply, planting an uncomfortable question she cannot easily dismiss: what if walking away is the only real victory? And that question lingers long after Hope and Deacon are gone, while Deke, left to face the consequences of his double life, finally allows himself to unravel, the carefully maintained composure collapsing under the crushing realization that the truth he feared revealing has cost him the one person who saw him not as a father defined by responsibility or a husband bound by obligation, but as a man capable of redemption. And now that belief is gone, replaced by the stark awareness that love, once fractured by lies, cannot simply be repaired with regret, and as days pass the fallout spreads outward, rippling through every relationship connected to the secret child and the hidden marriage, whispers giving way to confrontations, sympathy tangled with judgment, and through it all Hope maintains her distance, retreating into a space of reflection and healing that feels both lonely and necessary, because she knows that returning too soon would mean reopening wounds that have barely begun to close, and instead she focuses on rebuilding herself piece by piece, leaning into her values, her work, the quiet moments that remind her she is more than the sum of her heartbreak, while Deacon remains a steady presence, offering support without suffocation, pride without pressure, because he recognizes that this chapter is hers to write, and that growth cannot be rushed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, Hope begins to feel the fog lift, the sharp edges of betrayal dulling into something she can examine without breaking, and though the future remains uncertain she feels a renewed sense of agency, the knowledge that she can love deeply without losing herself, that she can walk away from what hurts even when it once felt like home, and that realization becomes her quiet triumph, a testament to resilience forged not in the absence of pain but in the courage to face it and choose differently. And somewhere in the distance the echoes of Deke's confession, of Steffi's stunned silence, of those 5 shocking words still linger, but they no longer define her, serving instead as markers of a turning point, the moment when secrets lost their power and a woman reclaimed her own, stepping forward not unscarred, but unbroken, ready to build a life grounded not in illusion but in truth. Time moves differently after a rupture like this, stretching and contracting in strange, uneven ways, and for Hope the days that follow feel both endless and fleeting, as though each morning arrives too soon and yet carries the weight of weeks already lived, because even in moments of calm the truth has a way of resurfacing without warning, ambushing her in the quiet spaces between tasks, in the familiar corners of rooms where she once imagined a future that now feels like a story she read, rather than a life she nearly lived. And yet there is something quietly transformative happening beneath the ache, a slow reordering of her inner world as she learns to sit with discomfort instead of running from it, to acknowledge grief without letting it dictate her choices, and in doing so she begins to understand that heartbreak, while devastating, can also be clarifying, stripping away illusions that once felt necessary but were never truly safe, and she finds herself reflecting not only on Deke's deception but on her own patterns, the way she has always believed in redemption so fiercely that she sometimes overlooked the cost of waiting for others to become who they promised to be, and this realization does not come with bitterness but with a gentle, sobering honesty that feels like growth rather than punishment, while Deacon watches this evolution with quiet pride, recognizing in his daughter a strength that has been there all along but is now finally being claimed, because he knows that choosing to leave, choosing to say "we're done with this place," was not an act of escape but of definition, a line drawn not in anger but in self-respect, and as the initial shock fades the world begins to respond in predictable ways, questions, speculation, sympathy offered with varying degrees of sincerity, but Hope remains steadfast in her boundaries, refusing to let her pain become public property, understanding that not every truth needs an audience and that healing often requires privacy more than validation. And this choice, too, marks a shift, signaling that she no longer feels obligated to explain herself to those who have not earned the right to her vulnerability, while elsewhere the consequences of Deke's double life continue to unfold in ways he could never have anticipated, because secrets, once exposed, have a way of unraveling everything they touch, And he finds himself confronted not only by the loss of hope but by the undeniable reality of the life he tried to compartmentalize, the responsibilities he cannot evade, the trust he has shattered, and the painful recognition that love, no matter how genuine, cannot coexist with sustained dishonesty without eventually turning corrosive. And as he grapples with this reckoning, he begins to understand that remorse alone is insufficient, that redemption, if it is possible at all, demands a level of accountability he has long avoided. And this realization is both humbling and terrifying, because it requires him to confront himself without the comforting illusion of being misunderstood or unfairly judged, while Steffy, too, is changed by the fallout in subtle but undeniable ways, because witnessing Hope's departure forces her to sit with an unease she cannot easily dismiss, the unsettling awareness that power does not always equate to control, and that sometimes the most decisive move is not asserting dominance but relinquishing the battlefield altogether. And though she would never frame it this way, Hope's refusal to stay and fight on familiar terms leaves Steffy facing a void where conflict once thrived, prompting a reckoning of her own about what victory truly looks like. And as these parallel journeys unfold, Hope continues to rebuild her sense of self with deliberate care, rediscovering parts of her identity that existed long before Deke entered her life, nurturing friendships that offer stability rather than drama, finding solace in routines that ground her, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the sharpness of her pain begins to soften, transforming from an open wound into a scar that tells a story without reopening it. And she learns that healing is not linear, that there are days when she feels strong and resolute and others when a single memory can still bring her to tears, but she no longer fears these fluctuations, understanding that resilience is not the absence of sadness but the ability to move forward despite it. And in moments of reflection she acknowledges the child at the center of the secret with a surprising tenderness, recognizing that innocence should never be collateral damage in the wake of adult choices. And this compassion becomes another marker of her growth, evidence that her heart, though bruised, has not hardened. And this balance, between self-protection and empathy, between closure and openness, becomes the foundation upon which she begins to imagine a future unburdened by lies, a future where love is not something she has to interrogate for hidden truths. And as time passes, the phrase, "we're done with this place," evolves in her mind from a declaration of departure into a mantra of intention, reminding her that she is no longer willing to remain in environments that thrive on secrecy, manipulation,